My father said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. We were standing in his driveway, my sister Camille behind him with her arms crossed, my mother watching from the porch. Family doesn't owe you anything, Theo. The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. He said it like wisdom. Like he was teaching me something valuable about life. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something inside me go perfectly still. Not angry. Not hurt. Just done. You're absolutely right, I said, nodding slowly. Family doesn't owe me anything. My father smiled, satisfied that I'd finally understood. I'm glad we agree, he said. We do, I replied, pulling out my phone. Which is why I'm canceling your health insurance. Effective immediately. The smile fell off his face like a mask slipping. What? You don't owe me anything, I said calmly, already pulling up the insurance portal. And I don't owe you anything. That's what you just said. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Camille went pale. My father took a step forward, hand raised like he was going to grab my phone. Wait, Theo, that's not what I meant. But it's what you said, I interrupted, meeting his eyes. And for once in my life, I'm going to take your advice. Before I tell you what happened in the 60 seconds after I hit confirm, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Drop a comment, hit subscribe, because this is the story of what happens when the person who's been holding everything together finally lets go. My name is Theo Brennan, and I spent 32 years learning how to be invisible while keeping everyone else visible. I'm not the oldest child. I'm not the youngest. I'm the middle, born 3 years after Camille, 3 years before our brother Preston died at 15 from leukemia. That death rewrote our entire family. Before Preston got sick, I was just another kid, average grades, decent at soccer, unremarkable in the way middle children often are. After he died, I became something else, the spare. Not the golden child like Camille, who could do no wrong. Not the ghost of Preston, who became perfect in death. Just the one who was still there, still breathing, still expected to be grateful for it. My parents poured everything into Camille, her college, her career, her dreams. She became a physical therapist, opened her own practice, got married to a guy named Brett who worked in medical device sales. They bought a house in the suburbs of Nashville with a lawn service and a 3-car garage. Meanwhile, I worked my way through community college, transferred to UT Knoxville, graduated with a degree in information systems and got a job doing IT support for a healthcare company in Memphis. Not glamorous. Not impressive. Just steady. Which made me perfect for what my family needed. Reliable, undemanding, and available. It started small. A call from my mother in my mid-20s. Theo, your father and I are updating our insurance plans. Could you add us to yours? Just until we figure out Medicare. I was 26. Medicare was years away for them. But I said yes. Then came the car repairs I paid for. The credit card debt I cleared. The property taxes I covered when my father's contracting business hit a rough patch. The endless small requests that added up to years of my income quietly funneling into their lives. I kept track at first, not because I wanted to hold it over them, but because I worked in systems. I documented things. It was just what I did. By the time I was 32, I'd given them over $200,000 in direct support. Health insurance, car payments, home repairs, medical bills, and a dozen other expenses that somehow always became my responsibility. And then there was Camille. My sister had a gift for needing things. Her practice was struggling, even though she drove a new Lexus. Her marriage was strained, even though they took 2 vacations a year. She was always one crisis away from disaster, and I was always one phone call away from fixing it. Just this once, my mother would say, Camille's under so much pressure. I paid for Camille's business loan when the bank denied her. I paid for her eldest son's braces. I paid for the roof repair on the house she and Brett owned free and clear. Every time, I told myself it was temporary. That eventually, they'd stand on their own. That family helped family. Until the day my father told me family didn't owe me anything. It was a Saturday in October. I'd driven to Nashville from Memphis to help my father fix a drainage problem in his backyard. 3 hours of digging trenches in the mud, laying pipe, making sure water wouldn't flood his basement the next time it rained. When I finished, I was covered in mud and sweat. My father handed me a beer and nodded at the yard. "Good work," he said. Not, "Thank you." Just, "Good work," like I was a contractor he'd hired. Camille showed up an hour later with her family, clean and smiling, carrying a store-bought pie. My mother hugged her like she'd just returned from war. We sat on the back porch, and somehow the conversation turned to money. Brett was complaining about taxes, about how hard it was to stay ahead. "Tell me about it," my father said. "This country's built to punish people who actually work." I bit my tongue. My father hadn't worked a full-time job in 3 years. I'd been covering his insurance premiums for the last 7. Camille jumped in. "We're thinking about expanding the practice, but the overhead is killer. I don't know how we're supposed to grow when everything costs so much." My mother made sympathetic noises. My father shook his head. "You'll figure it out," he said. "You always do." I set down my beer. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something." All eyes turned to me. "I'm thinking about buying a house," I said. "But my savings are pretty thin. I've been covering a lot of expenses the last few years, and I need to rebuild." My father frowned. "What expenses?" I blinked. "Your insurance. Mom's prescriptions. The car payments. The roof work last year." "We didn't ask you to do that," he interrupted. The air on the porch went still. "Yes, you did," I said carefully. "Mom called me. She said you couldn't afford the premiums and asked if I could help." My mother looked at her hands. My father's face hardened. "We asked if you could," he said. "We didn't ask you to keep doing it for years. That was your choice." Something cold slid down my spine. "My choice." "Yeah," Camille chimed in. "No one forced you, Theo. You offered." I turned to her slowly. "I paid off your business loan." "And I appreciated it," she said, like she was talking to a child. "But that was a gift. You gave it freely." "I gave it because you said the bank turned you down and you'd lose everything." She shrugged. "Things worked out." I looked at my father. "So none of this, none of the money, none of the help, that counts for anything?" My father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Theo, here's the thing. Family doesn't owe you anything. We help each other because we want to, not because we're keeping score." "I'm not keeping score." "You clearly are," Camille said. "Or you wouldn't be bringing this up now." "I'm bringing it up," I said, voice tight, "because I've been helping for years and now that I need to focus on my own future, you're acting like it never happened." My father stood up. "That's exactly your problem, Theo. You're always looking for credit. Always expecting something in return. That's not how family works." "Then how does it work?" I asked. "Family doesn't owe you anything," he repeated, slower this time, like I was dense. "The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be." He said it like wisdom. I felt something inside me go perfectly still. "You're absolutely right," I said. My father smiled. "I'm glad we agree." "We do," I said, pulling out my phone. "Which is why I'm canceling your health insurance. Effective immediately." The porch went silent. My father's smile collapsed. "What?" I pulled up the insurance portal, navigating to the dependents section. "You don't owe me anything. And I don't owe you anything. That's what you just said." "Theo," my mother said, voice rising. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous," I said calmly. "I'm accepting Dad's advice. Family doesn't owe me anything. So I'm going to stop acting like they do." I clicked through the screens, remove dependent, confirm, yes I'm sure. My father took a step forward. "Wait, you can't just." "I can," I said, hitting the final button. And I did. "Your coverage ends at midnight tonight." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Theo, your father has a prescription that costs $800 a month without insurance." "Then he should figure it out," I said. "He's good at that, right? He always figures it out." Camille stood up, face flushed. "You're being a child." "I'm being exactly what Dad taught me to be," I said, standing. "Independent. Self-sufficient. Not expecting anything from family." My father's face had gone from shock to rage. This is how you treat your parents? After everything we've done for you? I laughed, actually laughed. Everything you've done for me? Name one thing. One thing you've done in the last 10 years that wasn't me bailing you out. We raised you, he snapped. Until I was 18. Then I raised myself. And apparently, I've been raising you too. I pocketed my phone and turned toward my car. My mother was crying now. Theo, please. We need that insurance. Then you should have thought about that, I said, before you told me family doesn't owe each other anything. We didn't mean you, she sobbed. I stopped, keys in hand. I know you didn't. That's the problem. I got in my car and drove away. Behind me, I could hear my father shouting, but I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The calls started before I even made it back to Memphis. My mother, crying so hard I could barely understand her. My father, furious, demanding I fix this immediately. Camille, calling me selfish, cruel, vindictive. I didn't answer. Instead, I spent the drive making a list in my head of every other thing I needed to cancel. By the time I walked into my apartment, I decided, if family didn't owe me anything, then I didn't owe them anything either. That night, I sat at my laptop and started clicking through accounts. The car insurance policy I'd added my father to 3 years ago? Removed. The streaming services I paid for that they all used? Cancelled. The credit card I'd given my mother, for emergencies, that had a $4,000 balance? Reported lost. New card issued to my address only. The automatic transfer I'd set up to help with their mortgage when my father's business slowed down? Stopped. Every thread connecting my money to their lives, I cut it. By midnight, I'd severed everything. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt light, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks and had finally set it down. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls. I blocked all of them. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Simone Park, and she specialized in financial elder abuse and family law. I found her through a colleague whose sister had gone through something similar. Tell me what happened, she said when I sat down in her office the following week. I laid it out. The years of support, the money, the dismissal, my father's declaration that family owed each other nothing. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Do you want your money back? No, I said. I want them to leave me alone. She raised an eyebrow. Legally? If necessary. She nodded slowly. I can draft a cease and desist letter. Make it clear that any further contact will be considered harassment. But Theo, are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. They already made that choice, I said. I'm just making it official. The letter went out 3 days later. It was clinical, professional, and final. Theo Brennan is terminating all financial and personal relationships with the following individuals. Any further contact will be considered harassment and will be met with legal action. The phone calls stopped immediately. The emails started instead. My mother sent long, rambling messages about how I was destroying the family, how Preston would be so disappointed, how I was throwing away everything we'd built. Camille sent shorter ones, calling me a coward, saying I'd regret this, that I'd come crawling back when I needed them. My father sent one message, a single line. You were always the weakest one. I read it once, then archived it. They could think whatever they wanted. I was done trying to prove I mattered. The first few months were strange. I kept catching myself reaching for my phone to check if they'd called, bracing for the next crisis, the next request. But the phone stayed quiet. At first, it felt wrong, like I'd forgotten to do something important, like leaving the stove on. Then, slowly, it started to feel like relief. I had money in my account at the end of the month. Not a lot, but enough. I didn't have to check my balance before buying groceries. I didn't wake up to texts about emergencies that somehow always required immediate wire transfers. I started sleeping better. I joined a gym. Made friends with a guy named Adrian who worked in accounting and didn't ask about my family. Started dating someone I met at a work conference. A woman named Kira who laughed at my jokes and didn't need me to fix her life. 6 months after I cut them off, I bought a house. Nothing fancy, just a small 3-bedroom in a quiet Memphis neighborhood with good schools and a yard I could actually use. When I signed the closing papers, I realized something. This was the first major life decision I'd made without considering how it would affect them. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a basement. A year later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Brett, Camille's husband. I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted you to know, Camille's practice is closing. We're declaring bankruptcy. I thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Part of me wanted to feel guilty. Mostly I just felt tired. I typed back one sentence. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope things get better for you." Then I blocked the number. 3 months after that, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "Your father had a stroke. He's in the hospital. I thought you'd want to know." I held the card for a long time, standing in my kitchen, sun streaming through the window I'd picked out myself. I thought about the man who'd told me family didn't owe each other anything. The man who'd taken years of my help and then told me I was weak for expecting acknowledgement. I thought about driving to Nashville, walking into that hospital room, being the bigger person. Then I thought about the life I'd built in the years since I left. The peace, the stability, the sense of being whole instead of hollowed out. I put the card in a drawer and went to work. That night, Kira asked if I was okay. I told her about the card. "Do you want to go see him?" she asked carefully. "No," I said. And I meant it. "Will you regret it?" I thought about that. "Maybe. But I'll regret losing myself more." She squeezed my hand. "Then don't go." So I didn't. It's been 3 years now since I cut them off. I'm 35, engaged to Kira, planning a wedding where none of my family will be invited. Sometimes people ask why, and I tell them the truth. They taught me that family doesn't owe each other anything. I just took them seriously. I don't know what happened to my father. I don't know if Camille's practice ever recovered. I don't know if my mother still lives in that house with the drainage system I fixed. And I don't need to know. Because I learned something in those 3 years. You can't save people who don't think they need saving. And you can't make people value you who've decided you're disposable. My father said family doesn't owe you anything. He was right. But what he didn't understand is that it goes both ways. They don't owe me anything. And I don't owe them the rest of my life. People sometimes say I should forgive them. That I should let it go, move on, be the bigger person. But I did move on. I moved on to a life where I'm not a backup plan, a safety net, or an ATM. I moved on to a family I'm building with Kira, one where help goes both ways, where respect isn't optional, where "I need you" doesn't mean "I need your money." My father said family doesn't owe you anything. I agreed. And I walked away from people who only loved me when I was useful. That's not cruelty. That's survival. And 3 years later, I'm still standing. If you've ever been the one everyone leaned on until you couldn't stand anymore, tell me your story. Where are you watching from? What would you have done? Hit subscribe if stories like this remind you that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let go. Because family isn't about who raised you. It's about who respects you. And some people will never learn the difference.